Hey, JSHomecook, home cooking channel. I found this pack in my cupboard, Wee Willy Chili. Bought it like a year ago in Minneapolis. And what we had for Wee Willy Chili was ground turkey meat, carrot, celery, bell peppers, jalapeno peppers, and shishito pepper. And then I guess also a long red boy. Also had some chicken stock, chickpeas, white cannellini beans, a big can of tomatoes, and then also a jar of tomatoes that we canned 2 years ago. I thought we were out, but we still had one kicking around. We started out by prepping our vegetables. Same standard procedure here, as always. If you're wondering why we're using ground turkey meat, it's not just because that's what we had in the freezer. We also had ground beef. But this is a white chili, and therefore it uses chicken or turkey. And that's according to Wee Willy himself. If you had the spice pack for the white chili but only had ground beef, I'm sure it would still turn out just fine. And we're also not really following the instructions for this spice mix. The spice mix just calls for the beans, the chicken stock, the meat, and the diced tomatoes. And for me, that's just not chili. Okay, I still need some celery in there. I want a little more substance than that, more vegetable. Has to have the onion. And I think Wee Willy would be just fine with that. Wee Willy knows it's not Wee Willy's chili, it's my chili. Wee Willy is just here to help. And we appreciate that, so thank you, Wee Willy. You'll notice I pulled the pith out of the jalapenos for this, and that's just because I don't want it to be too spicy. Um, Doing this again, I actually probably would have just used one jalapeno. And you'll notice I used quite a bit of peppers, and that's because I like peppers in my chili. I think they add a nice sweetness to it, especially the bell peppers. I guess not really the shishitos or the jalapeno, since they aren't very sweet. And of course, we want our chili to be chunky, so everything's getting a rough chop. We want large pieces of various vegetables floating around in there. And I suppose I'm misspeaking there. We don't want them floating. We want them suspended in a thick, gravy-like substance. We don't want our chili to be soupy. We want it to be thick and hearty and able to fill us with a vigor that we need to wrangle horses all day long. Whether or not carrot is customary in chili, I cannot say. I do like a little bit of carrot in there, not a lot, so that's why it's just one. And cutting the carrot in half and then taking the thicker part and splitting it lengthwise is something I like to do to try and get all the pieces roughly equivalent in size. You could just slice medallions and then make the bigger medallions thinner than the smaller ones, but medallions are for pirates, ninjas, and Olympians, and we are not those things. We are cowboys, but only for the duration of this video. And for the onions, I went with a medium dice, not quite as large of pieces as the celery or the carrot. And yeah, I think I'll just cut the video here. You've seen this. I wanted the jalapeno pieces to be fairly small, so I just quartered all of them lengthwise and then ran my knife through it and then did a rough dice until I was satisfied with the size of the pieces. And that's it. The long red chili got a similar treatment, just split it in half lengthwise. Didn't worry about the seeds or the pith. Despite its appearance, it was actually a sweet chili, not a hot one. And then I just sliced it up, and that was that. Because the shishitos have a very thin skin, I thought I would just slice them into medallions, but then after doing that, I changed my mind and sliced them in half lengthwise like I did the other peppers, and I did pull out the pith just because it did appear a bit thick on the stem side, and I didn't want that. And the only reason I added them was because I had them and didn't want them to go to waste. For the bell peppers, I quartered them lengthwise because I wanted the pieces to be slightly bigger than the other peppers. And then I ran my knife through them the same way I did all the other peppers. Fascinating stuff, I'm sure. Next, we have our big can of whole tomatoes. I would have used diced tomatoes if I'd had them, but I only had whole tomatoes, so that's what I used. And here we have some nice forehead footage of me dicing the tomatoes. Removing the tomatoes first, I suppose. This is a can of San Marzano tomatoes that I got at Costco in a big 8-pack. We usually buy those. It has basil in it, but I didn't think that it really affected the chili that much. To be honest, I don't think that basil that they add does much of anything really. But who am I to say for certain? Maybe it does do something and I just have shot taste buds and can't taste anything. If you're wondering why the footage looks a little wonky, kind of like bubbled, that's because I'm using my GoPro and it has a fish lens on it. GoPros, by the way, are absolute trash, in my opinion. Would not buy again. Mind you, mine is 8 years old at this point, so maybe since then they've improved the battery life and the functionality of them, but my money's on not buying one, so don't. Dicing the tomatoes was very easy, so if you're also using whole tomatoes, I just sliced them and then moved my knife so it's perpendicular to the slice and ran my knife through it until I was happy with the dice size. I'm sure you know how to do this, but I've got like 20 minutes of footage and I just keep cutting and cutting and there's just more footage and it's just never enough. So I'm just going to keep talking and yeah, enjoy. This flimsy little cutting board thing I have, by the way, is great for stuff like this when you don't want to get your chopping block all wet. It's nice and bendy so you can just funnel it into a bowl or whatever you're using to move your stuff that you're chopping. Yeah, it's a great little product. I'm not telling you to go out and buy one, though. I'm just sharing aspects of my personal life. This jar of tomatoes, by the way, once I had opened it, it looked very suspect. I believe the reason for that is because they're purple Cherokee tomatoes, and therefore they just have a certain look to them. Quite a bit darker than your regular tomato. Like if you can see there, that's a very dark colored juice that it's sitting in. And yeah, some of the pieces, they look dark and a little green too, to be honest. But I used them anyway, and yeah, I gave it a smell. I gave it a smell to make sure it was fine, and it smelled fine. I know you can't smell botulism, but you can boil the toxin out. So anyway, I used them and I'm still alive. Here we are today. After I got the tomatoes in the bowl, I mixed them up. Not really sure why. I just did. It did feel pretty cool though. After that, I got to work on the beans. I did buy 2 cans of cannellini beans for this because it said cannellini beans and I didn't have any other beans except for chickpeas. But I did use the 1 can of chickpeas because we had those, and yeah, I just wanted to use ideally what we have. And telling the truth, I actually do like chickpeas in chili quite a bit. I often do use it, even though it probably isn't very authentic to Southwestern American culture. This cut here is chaos. I had my sink full of soapy water and I didn't want to dump it. And I also didn't want the aquafaba in the chili. And additionally, I was trying to minimize the amount of dirty dishes that would need washing because of laziness. So I ended up with this sieve just filled right to the very top and above with beans, and they spilled everywhere, and the aquafaba got everywhere, and yeah, regrets. I did have the foresight, though, to avoid absolute catastrophe by moving the handle of the sieve away from where I planned on pouring away the aquafaba because I wanted to put the beans back into that measuring cup. So in that small way, I did somewhat plan ahead and avoid making problems for myself later. But, you know, don't try and be a hero. Don't be afraid of washing an extra dish. Just wash the extra dish. You'll thank yourself later. Finished off picking beans off the board, and then we were ready to start putting this all together. Put some oil in a preheated stock pot, and then we added the ground meat and started browning that. I think it's a bit of a misnomer saying I browned it. What I really did was cook it. There was very little browning, as seems to be the case whenever I make something with broken up ground meat. That just always seems to be the case and how it goes. The moisture content is just too high and there is very little browning that occurs. Maybe it's different for others, but that's how it goes for me. I don't know. Personally, I think any instruction that tells you to brown it is being a little dishonest and setting you up for unrealistic expectations. Get that meat in the pan, stir it around, and remember, it's not going to brown. Don't forget to season as you go, add a little salt here and there, but once you think your meat is all thoroughly cooked, you can go ahead and add your vegetables. I added just everything except for the tomatoes, which I'll add later. Let's get everything in the pot and then give it a little stir around. You know, this is basically the same as doing any mirepoix, except you also have the meat in there, in addition to the other vegetables like the peppers and whatnot. That might be the only additional vegetable. Once I was satisfied with the appearance of the mixture in the pot, I came in with the chili mix and added that. However, I did reserve a small amount, maybe about 2 tablespoons, for something later. I allowed that to continue cooking for about 2 minutes or so just to help liven up the spices, because supposedly that's a thing that works. Personally, I don't know if it's true, whatever. Sounds kind of like a cooking myth to me. At any rate, we livened up the spices by cooking it those couple of minutes, and then we added the diced tomatoes. And we mixed those in very thoroughly, and then when we were happy with how much we mixed it, we let it cook for a few minutes and let those tomatoes liven up in flavor. After that, we added a couple of cloves of garlic, just because I really do like garlic in everything. So there we go, a couple cloves of garlic. Mix that in, let it cook a couple of minutes, and then add chicken stock from your stewing hen. Remember when you did that? Stock for days. I let the pot get back up to temp before adding the beans, but then the next step was adding all the beans, as you see me doing here. And then we gave that a vigorous stir. After that, I allowed the chili to simmer and reduce in volume until it was the right consistency, and that took about 2 or 3 hours, as it said on the spice packet. Speaking of, here is the back of that spice packet. You can see it includes the ingredients as well as instructions and some advice how to make it your own instead of following the Wee Willy chili way. So the reason I reserved 2 tablespoons of the spice mix was so that I could go and try and create sort of a blend that would be similar or the same to it. Just because I added all those extra vegetables and stuff into the chili, I figured, the amount of spice they give you is per their instructions, so it would make sense that I might need more spice mix than what they have provided. And for anyone who's counting, that's a half teaspoon, so half a teaspoon cumin. Then I came in with half a teaspoon chili powder. Then what's that there? I think that's onion powder, so half a teaspoon onion powder. And really, all I'm really trying to do here is get an approximation of the color. So half teaspoon garlic powder. And that's really what I'm going with here. I did smell it and kind of taste some bits and pieces that were in it. But really, yeah, I'm just going by the color. And based on the color, it looks like it's mostly onion and garlic powder. That would be my guess. It also had dehydrated vegetables in the spice mix, and I don't have that, so I can't add that. That there is coriander seed or cilantro seed, whatever your preference. Smashed that up in the mortar and pestle and added that. That was about a 1/4 teaspoon. Their spice mix also included some other ingredients that I don't possess, like thickening agents, anti-caking agents, stuff like that. I think flour was in there too. I do have flour, but I'm not going to add flour. That there is white pepper, and I would recommend you do not add it. So don't add the white pepper. Omit. It in no way ruined the chili. It was a very good chili, but just based on comparing their spice mix to my spice mix, they obviously did not add white pepper as I had initially thought. After that, though, I added some peppercorns, probably about like 8 to 10. It's a small little pinch. And I think that's basically it for the spice mix. Oh, accent. Yes, I also added, what's that? 1/4 teaspoon. Yeah, about 1/4 teaspoon accent. And the reason I'm smashing it up there is because my accent comes in the shards. And in no way would that affect it once it goes in the chili. But to try and get the color right, I did think I would need to smash them up so they aren't in that shard state. So you can see there, pretty good job of approximating that color. Then I go in for the smell test to compare them, and yeah, I can tell white pepper kind of mucked it up a bit. So I'm going to add another 1/4 teaspoon of cumin and another 1/4 teaspoon of onion and garlic powder. Oh, maybe that's a full teaspoon. Let's see what I do here. Yeah, 1/4 teaspoon. And 1/4 teaspoon garlic. Then I mixed all that up and then came in for another smell test after that. And I realized that just trying to make the colors look the same is a pretty arbitrary process for approximating the Wee Willy chili spice blend. But my feeling is that I kind of know what is going to go into the chili spice mix: onion and garlic powder, chili powder, maybe paprika, maybe some cayenne. So I think the methods work well enough. And there was I'm adding more of everything again. So that was another like quarter teaspoon chili powder and another quarter teaspoon coriander seed. But like I was saying, I kind of know what goes in a chili spice mix, so approximating theirs based on color seems good enough for me. And it should be good enough for you too. It's just cooking. None of this really matters. And for what it's worth, I also didn't use all of this chili mix. I only used about half of it. The other half is still sitting in a little ramekin next to the stovetop. I believe it's more potent than the Wee Willy chili mix that came in the bag, because the Wee Willy chili mix also had the flour and cornstarch or whatever else they put in there, whereas mine is just pure spice, like a booster seat for Wee Willy. Anyway, after this little smell here, I determined that I was close enough and done, so that was the spice mix. And if you're going to try and make your own, that's kind of a good place to start, I guess. And then you can make it your own. Make it however you want it. More of this, less of that. The world is your chili. So I added that, and then the chili was done, and it looked like that. All long and skinny, and I threw a little bit of cheese on top, as per Wee Willy suggested, and it was really good. But then I also had some cornbread that I made to go with it, because as you know, you need cornbread with chili. And then I went in for a spoon, and it was good. I'd make it again. That's basically the video, guys. And if you want to know how to make that cornbread, you'll have to come back in a couple of days. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.